feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We are brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Friday morning. It's January 31st, almost said February there, after the Wolves' 138-113 victory over the Utah Jazz on Thursday night, which maybe on its face doesn't sound like a huge accomplishment. Obviously, Utah is not winning a lot of games this season, but I do think, given that the Wolves were on a road game back-to-back after an intense game in Phoenix the night before, having that type of performance that they did against Utah last night is meaningful. It was just on Monday against a decimated Hawks team that, kind of like Utah, that Finch said this after the game.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do see it from time to time against short-hand teams. We come out here and, we bullshit. And, it starts with our top guys.
I'm joined by Britt Robson from Mim Post today. And Britt, last time I talked to you, and I've noticed you haven't even been tweeting. I don't know, maybe you're on Blue Sky. I know I need to get over there.
I took off Wednesday night and then went on Blue Sky Thursday night.
Okay.
I try to go off and on, but when you take a night off, then you're 2 nights away from Twitter. And I just like going back and forth, for different reasons, obviously.
Well, I'm excited because I haven't talked to you since literally that press conference. I think you went home after that.
Yeah,
I went to the locker room.
Right, I had to write the next morning. Right, exactly.
So I'm excited to talk to you just kind of about all of this. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, who would have guessed on Monday when we were sitting there that we would be we're going to do a whole segment on Jaylen Clark and Luka Garza, what's kind of transpired over the course of the week. But I do think the place we need to start is with Ant. And Kyle and I yesterday talked about Ant's sort of response to those comments from Finch after the Atlanta game and how he responded on the floor and responded with his comments in the locker room in Phoenix afterwards. And then against Utah, it carried over. I mean, that Phoenix game, he has, after him being the one who was bullshitting in the Phoenix game, Ant has 33 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks. And then was maybe even better last night against Utah, 36 points, 6 rebounds, 11 assists, 3 blocks. He was 6 for 9 from deep. For the month of January, Ant finishes with 36 and 6 splits while shooting 44% from 3. And between that Phoenix and Utah game was named to his 3rd All-Star game. How are you going to remember this Anthony Edwards week? It kind of feels like a turning point in ways, sort of like that Indiana Cleveland shift happened last year when they went to Indiana and Cleveland last year after Cat got hurt.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I think it solidifies the Finch Ant relationship has been remarkably. Wolves fans are so lucky that their cornerstone star openly admires their coach, who the front office believes should be in long term. Relationships in the NBA can be really ephemeral, and the fact that Finch was there for all but the first half year really has made a difference. And Ant has grown every year, and Finch has been tough on him sometimes. Certainly has no sympathy for injuries that are not, totally waylaying injuries, and has occasionally called him out directly. And Ant responds. And when Ant went on that post or pre-Thanksgiving rant about, what do they need to do? Well, we need to listen to our coach, is one of the things he said during that time. Mm-hmm. He has steadfastly supported what Finch is doing. I can't remember a time where Ant just basically said, nah, Finchie's wrong, or this is bad.
But Monday was kind of like that against Atlanta in the locker room. It felt like that a little bit.
Well, it felt like that, except that he said, I didn't see it that way, is all he said. And it wasn't like when Jace Frederick of the Pioneer Press pointed out that, there were 9 turnovers in the 3rd quarter. That had nothing to do with bad shooting. He said, we were just being aggressive. And then you could tell, even he knew that was a bullshit answer. Yeah. And so he said, I don't know, man. I'm not going to throw the Atlanta Hawks under the bus, And then, of course, he has a day to think about it. And, look, it's still incredible to me that he works hard to be transparent, even like amending things that, you come into a locker room after a game and all these people want to ask you a bunch of questions. And then you react with your first thing. If I think of the times I've had a take on a game and somebody wanted to interview me right after the game about that take.
Yeah.
And 24 hours later, I go, oh no, that wasn't the right take,
Mm-hmm.
And I have the luxury of not having it be personal. I'm just sitting there watching other people. If I was in the middle of it, right. Of course, I might have a much different take. So I think the guy has an incredibly high character. Finch coaches him tough, but also Finch has a great quality of mixing in context on these things that I've often said when he criticizes a player, it's almost like just the facts. Hey, it's not, I'm not trying to hurt the guy. I'm just trying to say that these are the facts,
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think it's a great relationship is one of the takeaways I get from that. Another is we can focus on the numbers, but Ant's defense rose up in these last two games. And that is, if there is one thing that would improve this team's chances of winning a championship or being heavier in contention this year, it would be Ant dedicating himself more at that end of the court to all the little mundane help defense, recognize rotations, worry about your peripheral vision on the backside, low man stuff. I mean, much more than anything else, that is the problem usually when Ant is to be at fault for something. Yeah, shot selection can be off sometimes. And yeah, he can be a little bit of a hero guy and sometimes, but that comes with the territory of being an alpha scorer, being a great two-way player the territory that comes with that is being pretty consistent on defense. Nobody would argue with Ant's ceiling on defense. He's an incredibly effective on-ball defender, especially when he's motivated. And he's a fairly decent off-ball defender when he's motivated. He was not motivated at all against Atlanta, and there have been multiple times this year when he has not been motivated. I thought the last two games, he definitely did get into people. He had an occasional flaw, but typical of the anybody. Nobody's a perfect NBA defender. Point is, his defense also rose up, and that is an area of concern that he needs to address. And the final thing I want to say about it is that Atlanta game was kind of an outlier aside from the defense. On offense, Ant had a phenomenal January. I pulled up some stats. Everybody wonders about Ant taking too many threes.
Yeah.
Well,
you made 44% of them.
And also, Giannis Antetokounmpo shot 135 free throws in the month of January. Ant and SGA were second at 130.
Wow. Yeah.
Free throws made, SGA first, 124. Ant second, 110. Dame Lillard third, 85.
Wow.
So Ant, aside from SGA, who's a freak of nature, Ant had 25 more free throws in the month of January, free throw makes, than anybody else in the NBA.
Damn.
And the guy is supposedly, problems getting to the rim. Well, not if he's getting to the line that often.
Well, and to bring Finch back up again, he said earlier this month at some point that that was a January goal that him and Ant, or the coaching staff set with Ant, was as good as the 3-point shooting has been to more effectively get to the line. And because Ant had a stretch there where he was shooting like well below 50% from two, because he was getting to the mid range where he doesn't make 50% of his shots. And then at the rim too, he was kind of trying to avoid contact to finish, and now more often going through it, getting to the line. I mean, the Wolves as a team, led by him, but have gotten to the line a lot more. And unsurprisingly, here we go. It's like the best offensive month of the season. That's low-hanging fruit, as Finch would say. I wanted to note on the defensive stuff, because the turning point of the defensive energy shift is between that Atlanta game and the Phoenix game, where we talked about this. They had a film session on Wednesday morning where Finch really laid into the whole team, but specifically Ant, about his effort defensively. And we played some of those clips yesterday. I think everybody listening kind of knows what that was. But Ant kind of copped to, like, when he put these clips up on the board, I can't argue with it, because I'm not running back, or I'm not putting in effort here. Ant said, quote, "Nobody in the league should be getting from end to end faster than me if I really want to." I'm gonna just throw this clip up, like, from the game.
Yeah, please, because I hadn't seen it. Right.
It's so here. This is just a clip of Randle turning the ball over. Just watch Ant here at the top of the screen, and for listeners, it's just Ant sprinting back. But this is really noticeable, and it's exactly that. Like, look, Ant's flying there, man.
Yeah.
And I mean, and Collier still finishes it here, but
he was there.
And then he comes down and hits a three right afterwards. The other side, it's like the energy and activity play off of each other there.
Right. And not surprisingly, the offense has been great.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was really significant last night, first of all, that the team came out and trailed 25-10 against Utah, 10-win team. And everybody was thinking about Washington and Atlanta and some of those character eroding games that we've seen. And some of it was, to be fair, the Jazz were hitting everything from deep. And, that happens sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Players get hot. But what I really enjoyed about that was them getting back into things and getting ready. And what I also noticed was Mike Conley is out, and Randle goes down for the rest of the game in the first quarter with the team down 14 points.
Right.
So, excuse me. So all of a sudden you have your two other playmakers, arguably your two most active playmakers on the team, in Randle and Conley, both gone.
Right.
And the team's down 14. And Ant lays out 11 dimes. And to everybody, feeding Gobert, feeding Jayden on a outlet streak and a corner three, feeding Naz, feeding the rookies, feeding Jaylen Clark on a bucket. 11 assists in addition to his points. I can't say enough about the fact that Ant's charisma and his spark, what attracts him to people, or people attracted to him for, are sometimes bury the things. This guy is one of the greatest athletes in NBA history and has fashioned one of the prettiest, most accurate jump shots that we've ever seen.
Yep.
I mean, that's an incredible combination. That is
then it only becomes the missing variable is mentality and focus and understanding and execution, which are things that come with time and age. And I think, like, this week is another example of, like, adding some of that. That's like the connective tissue between those two things. The flash that he has in his game and the precision that he's developing, as a shooter in that sort of way. Did you not see the Ant on the film session?
No,
clip?
Did not see it.
I'll just play it for you. I mean, listener, if you listened yesterday, I played a longer version of this. This is a shorter one, but I think I don't mind playing it again. It's meaningful to show the connection, I think, between Ant and Finch.
He pretty much was just basically telling us, like, how much do you care about the game, and the clips that the clip that the coaches have for us, I mean, we can't say we care about the game at all with the stuff that we watch. So, like, when he was getting on us, especially me, like, you know, when you're growing up, like, to be an adult, like a young adult, like, you always, like, want to think about, like, oh, he trying me, I want to say something back. Like, he trying my manhood or, like, but when you think about it, like, when you get in the room, like, after filming the day when I got in the room and thought about it, I'm like, man, I would have been a fool in film to say something back. You know what I'm saying? Like, he ain't trying my manhood. I really must not care about the game because the clips on there, they look bad. You know what I'm saying? So I can't be buddy with somebody like, oh, I should have said something back. Like, nah, he was right. So I definitely felt some type of way about it, and I told my best buddy about it, like, hey, Fitchy got on my butt today, but he was right. You know what I'm saying? So I had to tighten up.
That seemed that on Monday when we talked to you after that game, you were kind of like, I don't necessarily see exactly where he's coming from. You said you just felt like we were missing shots, but like, is this kind of one of those things where maybe it does take a film session for some of that stuff to
for sure,
set in?
Most definitely. I mean, yeah.
Sure.
So that was
Gotta love him.
Yeah, I
How
mean,
do you
that's
not
good.
love that?
That's good. That's good. And it totally highlights the one area where he's not a 10 out of 10 yet, right? But like trending in the right direction. And what are you supposed to expect? Like, okay, he's a 10 out of 10 shooter. He's a 10 out of 10 athlete. He has like a 10 out of 10 emotional intelligence. I think when we talk about him being a leader and charisma and all those sort of things, like, he's not going to be a 10 out of 10 in everything. And this, which I think credit to Finch, has understood from day one of like, this is what I need to boost it up from a 2 to a 2.5 to a 3.5. I don't know what level it's at, but that's part of that's probably Finch's 10 out of 10 is his ability to connect and understand his players and, you know, keep pulling Ant up, raising that bar, because the higher you get that bar, and so long as he physically remains the same, you're just elevating this kid to special levels.
And this team and this franchise as a result, because he is that impactful.
Mm-hmm. Let's grab our first break, and then we obviously Ant's part of all of this. I just wanted to make sure that we started with him, and then also I'm excited to talk with you about like Garza and all the other crazy stuff that happens. It's always fun when we get some different guys to play. But today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and mark your calendars that Britt and I will be doing a live show at Falling Knife on Thursday, February 20th. It is the last day of All-Star break. The Wolves play their first game back from the break on the 21st. We'll do the normal routine. We kind of do a happy hour at 6 o'clock and come talk to Britt and I as we're kind of, you know, getting set up. We'll do a live show at 7 where we, as always, take live listener questions. It's been a couple months since we've done a live show, and we'll hang out a little bit afterwards. I know that's still, 3 weeks away, but want that on your radar. And then also coming up at Falling Knife is their Super Bowl party. All you can eat rectangle pizza buffet that includes Philly cheesesteak sandwiches and pulled pork sandwiches. It's all you can eat. It's $50. That includes your entrance in the all you can eat buffet, a pitcher of beer or two of their specialty beers that they have on tap there. If you're looking for a place to watch the Super Bowl, do check out Falling Knife. You can find the link to purchase those tickets. It's in the show notes below here. If you're on YouTube or in podcast version, you can find that in the show notes as well, or go to Falling Knife BC on Instagram is another option there as well. We are also brought to you today by Prize Picks. And speaking of the Super Bowl, they got a whole bunch of stuff up there for the Super Bowl. I was looking at it this morning, and I'm going to do a bunch of different ones of these over the time. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a running back specific one. Well, first, we're going to get the Patrick Mahomes free square in there. If he throws for 1 yard, you win that. That's a promotion they have. And then Saquon Barkley, I'm going to say, has more than 2.5 receiving targets. He gets the ball thrown to him 3 times. If that happens, that hits. And then Isaiah Pacheco's rushing number is at 22.5 rushing yards. I know Kareem Hunt and him are splitting the ball there. I just feel like they give Isaiah Pacheco enough opportunities to have 25 rushing yards. So check out Prize Picks for the Super Bowl. Obviously, for these NBA games too, we're telling you about the Wolves ones as well. But I think if it's Super Bowl Sunday and you have a Prize Picks account, it'd be fun to have a couple things going on there. So go to PrizePicks.com, the PrizePicks app. You can use the promo code Dane for a $50 sign-up bonus when you create an account, and they'll have a handful of different promotions going on for the Super Bowl. Again, that's PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app, promo code Dane. Let's do next. It's kind of like a combo, Britt, where I know this sort of happened out of order, but Randle gets hurt.
Right.
And, it's a groin injury. Didn't look good.
No.
And they're going to then have to backfill, right? Not assuming he misses some time. Naz Reid moves into the starting lineup, and holy shit, Naz Reid. That's something we got to talk about. The shooting is insane. The shooting is insane from Naz in January. The power of keeping him one pass away from Ant in pick and roll is, it's a cheat code. It really is a cheat code. I'm excited to see that, even though it's not. Julius played really good in Phoenix. Even the play he got hurt on last night going to the basket was a powerful finish. He is doing the thing where he is eating up smaller defenders. But anyways, Naz will move into the starting lineup for Julius, and they're going to have to backfill that behind. And if you and I would have had a conversation on Monday about, hey, if Julius Randle misses a game, what's going to happen? Okay, Naz Reid's going to start, and probably Josh Minot takes on
right.
That's what we would have thought, right? Well, what we learned over these two games is, or what kind of has come to be true, is the backfill is Jaylen Clark, which would not have seen that one coming. It's kind of like maybe Jaden moves to the 4 and Jaylen Clark's out there, but it was a lot of times where Jaylen Clark was out there when there was not a second big.
Right.
And then, so that was the Phoenix game. He played in the Utah game as well and played well there. But Luka Garza has also been is going to be a backfill answer. He was excellent in that game. So I'd like to, I guess that's 4 guys: Randle, Reid, Garza, and Clark. I think they're all part of it's new and interesting, but it's also needs to sustain in some ways. Yeah. Choose your adventure there. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with Naz, just because another fact, in January, he hit 46 of 80 shots from deep.
Jesus. 80 is the crazy number there. 80 is actually the crazy
15 games. So 15 and 80 goes 5 15s to 75. So a little over 5 and about 5 and a fifth game. But 46 in 15 games. Again, 57.5% from 3-point territory. And now, I tweeted this out on Blue Sky last night, but if Randle is down for any significant period of time, watch those 6 man of the year things start to change because it happened last year.
That's a good call.
When Cat went down, and all of a sudden everybody realized, oh, if this guy gets like 28 to 30 minutes a game, he's suddenly the 6 man of the year. And I think Peyton Pritchard will be really hard to dislodge.
Right.
But the fact that Naz is like 5th or 6th, as the guys mentioned, if you watch the Wolves at all, he's people are wondering why he didn't take a step forward this year. It's because he thought he was going to be a small forward. And he trained himself to do yet another role change on a career full of role changes and having people who are taking minutes away from a guy who would start for 80% of the teams in the NBA. And so I think his play this year, aside from the fact he's been getting a little bit too much in his own head about the refs and occasionally is getting burned on defense because of, trying to figure this out. Once Finch went to Randle guarding the big in the second unit, that helped a lot. Once you started to go to a little bit more of a fly around, which is Naz's game on defense, I'd say 80% of Naz's fantastic plays are chase down plays, whether it's steals, blocks, or getting in position. When Naz is on the move, he's a much better defender than when he's stationary. And so the guy kind of on the sly, has been steadily rising in terms of his contributions, and the 3-point shooting, is more than the cherry on top. It's just another very large scoop of ice cream or something.
Because it opens up, it is another scoop of ice cream. That is the analogy, because it's another scoop of ice cream for Ant.
Yeah.
Like it seriously, it's like when Naz is there next to him, or one pass away, or even if Naz is the screener on the pop, you got to defend that differently. You can't load up on Ant in the same way if that's going to be a 45% pop 3. Right. And then even if it's Rudy and you keep Naz one away, like you can't load up on that either. Naz's guy can't come in there to tag the roller or to provide gap help on Ant there, or they can. Actually, they're trying to. And you know what Ant or Dillingham are doing? It's just Naz, and he's feels like he's coming in. He's making his first 3 threes every single time. Yeah, it does feel like it's swelling. I mean, we would have said about 6th man of the year, like we would have said at this time last year, we did before Cat got injured and Naz kind of took on a bigger role. Oh, this is Malik Monk's award. Like
right.
It in similar ways to Pritchard now, but yeah, it's going to be an opportunity for Naz. I don't know what the injury is. I haven't gotten. I mean, who knows? Nikhil looked like he tore his Achilles. It was back the next game. So we'll see.
And then Naz was out. You had that taped shoulder, and then you find out illness. Okay, well, who knows what's going on? Right?
He needed a day. I asked Finch about Naz before the Phoenix game, just more kind of like broadly about his role. I thought this was a cool answer. I'll play that.
What is, from your purview, what does that look like for Naz, of the switch from Carl to Julius? And how
I think I mean, to me, I've always commented and been impressed on Naz's ability to adjust every season to what his role is, and but I felt his role was pretty well defined coming into the season. I really did. I didn't think it was going to change a whole lot. Obviously playing with new teammates takes some time, and defensively there were certainly issues we had to kind of figure out with those guys, but I think some of it is just he just kind of just accepted that this was his role. His role again was going to be, and he was 6th man of the year, so it's not like it was a small role. I mean, but maybe he had visions of starting or playing 36 minutes a night and all this stuff. I don't know. Maybe he, being a contract year for him, maybe he just had too much that he wanted, and it bothered him that and I think he just accepted it and kind of found his groove again. And again, it's good karma that all the things, shot starts going in when when you don't play. You play with a free mind, and you asked me, as many people have early in the season, like what does he have to do to keep growing his his game, and my reply has been he's got to do it again. Just got to do it again. Like that's what we expect him to do, is to have the same season he had last year. That's a great starting point.
It's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, especially since he's got a $15 million player option contract year, indeed.
A little risky. But I get it too. I get it too. I get both sides of it. I mean, I get why Naz thought that, and I get why maybe some people are listening to that right now and being like, well, is he the future, or not? You just want him to
play that to rest right now. I mean, but Naz Reid towels are probably going for like $100 on eBay or something right now.
More than that.
So I mean, it's like the guy is a folk hero here in town. Julius Randle, who I've been up and down on. Currently, I'm pretty up on. I think he's really done a lot. Gotta be. But in terms of long-term helping the team, fan base excitement, synergy with the other second-line players, it is a no-brainer, is being too kind about it. If you opted to, in some way, shape, or form, keep Julius Randle, which inevitably makes it very difficult to keep Naz Reid, then the Cat trade was a failure. The decision you're making now compounds that failure, and it makes boneheaded too kind. I mean, it's if the Wolves fail to keep Naz Reid on this team, given everything Finch just said about him, he's been ultimately adaptable. He signed a group to special so that when he was a $12 to $15 million player, he was making 2 or 3 for a couple of years. You've started people over him and done these great experiments, always with the assumption that he will change to help the plan work. And it has always been that way. He's changed and made the plan work. If a guy like that doesn't deserve to get paid, then your integrity as an organization, all this talk about Tim Connelly saying it's all about character of people and who we decide to keep on this team and X and X. And this is not a slight against Julius Randle, who's in an unfortunate situation as being the guy who is somewhat of a salary impediment to making this happen for Naz. But the bottom line is you have to find a way to have that guy be part of your firmament. Now that McDaniels is coming into his own again, and we just got through talking about Ant, and not for nothing, Rudy signed for the next 2 or 3 years. Dillingham is signed for the next 2 or 3 years. If you look at who the players are on this team and what kind of January they've had, and all these guys, and DDV will be out with an injury, but he's got 2 years after this. The future for this team right now, provided that Naz gets signed to a deal that doesn't, totally screw you over, is really, really good news. And so anybody who's worried about Naz Reid not being on the team this year, I have more respect for the intelligence of Tim Connelly than that. And if I'm wrong, we're going to have some interesting podcasts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there will be a cost to it. I mean, if you do bring back Julius Randle and you bring back Naz Reid, then you get strip mined elsewhere.
Yeah.
There is a possibility though that could happen. It would depend on what Naz's feeling is about. If I were Naz, I would want to know if Julius Randle is going to be on the team or not. And if I were Naz, I would understand if, as Finch is kind of hinting at in that answer, if like, hey, I am 25, 26. I'm ready for that 35-minute a night role. So, yeah, it doesn't really line up. That part doesn't.
And
really
that
line
was
up.
the flaw. But that was the risk you took. I mean,
all right.
And now, I mean, let's face it, the Cat trade looks better for the Wolves now than it did a week ago. Mm-hmm. But there's still a lot to prove here, and Cat continues to play extremely well. Randle has done everything anybody could ask of him. This team remains, in tribute to Tim Connelly, we have not had a guy come in and be disruptive for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And even when Randle's initial fit was just obviously aggravating what McDaniels and Connelly could do, and that took weeks to straighten out. But it got straightened out without any villains being in the mix here. Julius Randle is not a villain here. And so I trust the organization. I see no reason not to trust the organization to try to do the right thing within the contours of what they have. The trading deadline is a week from today. We don't need to go over chapter and verse and hammer this again. I think if something is there for them, they'll pull the trigger. If not, it will be an interesting summer. But at the end of the day, if Naz Reid isn't on the Timberwolves for the 25-26 season, it will be a gross miscalculation and will make the Cat trade look really bad.
Agreed. Let's do Jaylen Clark.
Yes, all means.
He played 27 minutes in the 2 games combined against Phoenix and Utah and was a plus 43.
Yeah.
Plus 9 against Phoenix in 10 minutes, plus 34 in 17 minutes last night against Utah, which means the Wolves only won those 2 games by a combined 33 points. They lost the 69 minutes. Jaylen Clark was on the floor in those 2 games by 10 points. Did not see this coming at all. I felt, though, in the moment, sitting there next to Kyle and Chris in Phoenix, and Jaylen Clark went to the table. My initial reaction is like, what? But then it did make sense for the Phoenix matchup where
all those mid-range shooters.
Yeah. And even Beal, who everyone like wants to bag on, and, kind of rightfully so this year, he is somebody that if it is Beal, if it's Beal, Durant, and Booker out there, and you have only two good defenders on the floor and you put them on Booker and Durant, like Beal can go get his against, a poor defender. So the Wolves counter was, I'm just going to throw to the gamut at him, have Nikhil out there on Booker, Jaden on Durant, and, Clark out there against Beal. That was a smart move. That was a smart move. One I didn't see coming. And, then as it kind of works in the NBA, sometimes try something, you hit something for one specific reason, and then you go, whatever, we're just going to play him again tomorrow. It's not like,
on a back-to-back.
On a back-to-back.
Here you go. And you got a guy who, I'll never forget his press conference announcing the draft picks. I'll run through a wall for this. I'll do, the guy was basically saying,
totally.
I'll be a suicide bomber for the NBA if you want. You just tell me what to do. I am ready to be molded. And then, the idea that he developed a little bit, just enough offense so it doesn't look really, really ugly out there when he's on the other side of the court. Whatever happened, and Finch mentioned this prominently either after Utah or after Phoenix, that he went and honed his game a little bit in the G League. And that didn't need defense. The poor D League players who had their G League player, whatever it is, that had to be guarded by him, and that level was that was unfair. But I'm sure he honed his offense a little bit, at least enough to be like marginal offensive players, somebody you couldn't absolutely ignore, in part because he moves. He likes to move. And in retrospect, of course, you don't know. Finch has been just so reluctant to bump behind his eight-man group, and has begun to horsewhip Josh Minot. So you have this situation where you're wondering what was going to happen. But what has always been Chris Finch's number one priority on defense, bar none, all the time, it's ball pressure.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And who does ball pressure? He does ball pressure better than Jaden, who does it well, but does it a little differently, isn't in somebody's shirt as much.
Mm-hmm.
Nah probably does it better than anybody on the team. DDV does it pretty well. But Jaylen Clark is in that mix as like one of your top 3 or 4 right now on the team as a guy who hasn't played 100 minutes yet in the NBA, is one of your 4 best ball pressures guys on the team.
I remember in Vegas this summer league, he played and talking to him, and he got an opportunity to play obviously a ton of that. And there was one game, I think it was he had his first game back, which was his first time playing since the Achilles surgery. It was looked really rough. But then in the second game, he like totally found his rhythm. I think he had 7 or 8 steals. I remember talking to him after the game, and because a lot of the steals were of the off-ball version. And I was like, oh, Jaylen, I kind of thought like you were an on-ball guy. And he was like, oh, you didn't watch enough of me at UCLA. He's like, my thing is playing that middle ground and finding, and he had one of those last night, a poke away, like kind of poke away or playing passing lanes. He's really good at the ball container. I'm not saying anything you're saying is wrong, but I think like his fully formed defensive thing is taking some of those opportunistic chances and the ability to play the gap and recover and do that. So I do, as good as the defense stuff looked in these 2 games from him, I do think there's even more to it. He was very like straight line. It's like Rob Dillingham when at the beginning of the season, Rob's like, I'm a point guard. I'm only a point guard. You know what I mean? And then now we look at him.
Exactly.
Like, no, you're not.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think there's more there. I did look up a quote from that introductory press conference from Jaylen Clark 2 years ago. He's
The
like,
guy is gold. I'm really glad you're doing this.
Yeah, it's not the run through the wall one because I couldn't find that.
That's all right.
This one's good. I remember the run through the. I was looking for the run through the wall one, but I found this. And he said, "quote I feel like defensive basketball is just if you want to or not. There's a lot of people who feel like they can save their energy. They just don't devote to it. It's easy when you see a screen to just run into it and say, I got hit. It's hard to go get around it and stay with who you're defending. I just have that constant will. I take it personal. Like I didn't get scored on very much in college. I never got my ass busted. I wasn't that guy."
Right.
And I thought about this quote last night when he actually got called for a foul because the guy set a screen and he
shrugged like,
fuck that.
All right, then. And everybody on the bench is going, make the replay. Yeah. He's right. You know?
Yeah. I know the type of players that you and I, this is like an archetype of player that you and I really appreciate. I think back to our like 5 years ago, like, dude, are you watching Lou Dort at OKC? But what is important again for these players to be more than just a ball contained player and to be able to play in a real role, maybe even play in a playoff series eventually, is you need to be able to do more of that. You need to be able to hit open shots and be a functional cog in the offense.
He's a long way away from that.
And he airballed his first three last night, but 2 possessions later, stepped right into another one and hit it.
And hit it beautifully, right?
Yeah, like I mean that is definitely going to be a shortcoming of his. I thought it was absolutely hilarious when he drove in on the left side of the floor against Durant, left side of the floor, right? So that's a left-handed shot,
and went with an underhanded right
hand, and Durant just spiked that like
Durant wanted to send a message. You could have just grabbed the ball
easily. It was like in front of his face. Yeah. But just loved what I saw from Clark. And I mean, really just a big takeaway from these 2 games for me is the defense looks overwhelming again. Like, and
the offense is moving along better
than from the defense. The deflections, the runouts. There's more. I'm sure there's more like transition opportunities in this because guys like Clark are getting those pokeways, are getting deflections, making them run. Like that's what this team was defensively.
He got the steal and was running so fast in the other direction to get the steal that he just basically had to tap it like behind his back. But it was a perfect lead for Ant, who was already on the move in the other direction. It was almost like a relay race, only the runners were going in opposite directions and they had to pass the baton. But it worked out and synced up perfectly. It was just another one of these plays. I mean, I just love guys that the absolute frenzy with which they play has a comedic element to it because they're crazy. They are fucking crazy, you know? And you just have to laugh because it's so much fun.
That's what the defense was a year ago. That's what I'm saying. The defense was crazy like that. It was frenetic. It looked hard to play against. And that has not, I mean, I know the Wolves have been a top 10 defense the whole season, but there is a difference between top 10 and 1, you know? Right. Exactly. And this feels more like 1 because it just looks more difficult to score on them, given the ball contained, given the help, given the having, what was that lineup? Rudy at the 5, Jaden at the 4, Nikhil, Clark, and Ant. I mean, good luck, right? Like that group's going to struggle to score a little bit, but that's defensively, that's scary. So I don't know. I mean, it's gonna be one of those things too, where guys are going to come back healthy, and some of these guys are going to be shelved again. Right. But that's okay. That's part of having a roster, and I'm sure when Finch goes back to an 8-man rotation, people will be all up in arms about that. Now I'll get it, but this is for Jaylen Clark. This is right. Like an opportunity is there. Here you go, 12 minutes or whatever, a shift in each half. That's cool, and then reassess when Randle or Dante they're back and. Right. What that role ends up looking like. The other guy, if the third leg, you got another Clark thing?
No, I was just gonna say, I'm really looking forward to having him on Jordan Poole.
Me too. That's Saturday.
I know. You just basically say, okay, go get that guy.
Yeah, just stay there. Yeah, piss him off. Luka last night. I mean, what? So Luka played in the Phoenix game as well, just in the first quarter.
Yeah,
and I don't know if it stood out to you, but he was out there with like the starting group, and they looked like they had never played with Luka Garza before.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, if you're not gonna pass it to Luka when he's running the floor, if you're not gonna pass it to Luka when he's wide open above the break or in the corner, like, you can't play him. And they didn't play him. They're like, okay, this is, and Phoenix went smaller, and there was some of the other reasons for that, but they didn't let Luka do the Luka stuff. And for Luka Garza to be able to play, he needs to be.
He needs touches, right?
He needs touches. He he needs to do it himself too. He needs to get some offensive rebounds to get him start himself some touches. But you gotta, if he's got somebody rolled up in the post, like, pretty sure that's a point per possession look. At least you got to give it to him. And they did that.
That little jump hook from the baseline is just, we see it. The crazy thing about it, everybody, Jim, Pete, and Grady were talking about it last night. Anybody who's around the Wolves for any period of time that happens to show up 90 minutes before the game, we know what's happening out there. Luka Garza is absolutely abusing like 3 assistant coaches by taking things off the dribble, hitting slot threes, perfecting it. Like, he's got 4 moves, and he just grinds on those 4 moves every single day, both in practice and before the games, where that stroke from 3 is always going to be the same stroke. That footwork on the baseline is always going to be the same baseline. He's got one variation off it, but until anybody tries to figure out who he is, that little jump hook, and even when they do, the guy is not small. And he does hustle. Finch had him out there with Rudy for a few plays. And on one of those plays, it was a slam dunk between the two of them because neither one of them are quick enough to adjust. And that he called a timeout, and Naz was in like immediately, because that Rudy Luka thing, that will not work. I can.
But you know what did look good? Reid and Naz and Luka.
Naz and anybody is pretty good.
But they were both doing, to Luka's credit, I think, they were doing that play in the flow, play random. Those two ran a 4-5 DHO that rolled into one thing and then another DHO that led to one of the rolled up Luka in the post for Naz, just fed him, hook right away.
Exactly.
Those guys look like they'd played together before. I don't know if that's true, but maybe that's just Naz. You always say
Naz plays fast and makes good decisions. And any basketball player knows if somebody's playing fast and makes quick decisions, then your whole thing is locked in when he has the ball, locked in on what's my role in this play. So much of basketball off the ball is standing around, especially if the set play is broken down. You're trying to figure out what you have to do, but you're busy watching the guy with the ball figuring it out so that you can react, and everything slows down. Naz isn't standing there thinking.
Right.
He is on the move. He's showing you almost immediately where he's going and what he's doing. And so if you're a basketball player, especially if you're a basketball player as gluttonous for touches as Luka Garza is, all right, it's time for me to, get into my stuff, because this guy will give it to me if I'm open. And it's just, you're absolutely right about the fact that, he has to be almost a point a minute guy, because he's the flip side of Clark, right? His defense, he's elevated his defense to the point where he might be serviceable. I would not want a team to hunt him in the playoffs and have to play him. And, they pointed out on the broadcast last night, I didn't really notice it at the time, but they were trying to get Luka in pick and roll actions right away. And so that's going to happen. He's going to be
the first one, he walled it up and he got a block. He did.
I know that was good.
But you're right. That is obviously the weakness and the flaw in Luka's game, but it isn't like the all offensive player who doesn't care about defense.
Absolutely.
He absolutely cares about defense. He is just extremely physically limited in what he's able to do.
Right.
Yeah, he has the heaviest feet. But he's moving them as fast as he
and lost weight and did all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny about it, I mean, I made this thing in tweet, and it wasn't meant to be derogatory. It was just a fact that he looks like a player put together by AI, because he really is.
ChatGPT,
especially on defense. I mean, where that is most apparent is on defense, because he is doing everything possible to be an effective defender. So his form and technique are perfect, but it's in slow motion. It's like the DI replica of what a human being can do, because it isn't quite, the synapses are not like human synapses.
I like it.
And so that's, it is. And then, of course, he's got the Jack Armstrong face. He's got the way AI would put like NBA athlete. This guy is chiseled, all-American, facial guy. And so he's an AI replica. And I would imagine, like AI, that the model will improve over time.
So Britt and I went to the Wolves preseason game in Iowa in October.
Yeah. It's just great comment.
Oh my God. Yeah. So there's a bunch of Iowa reporters there at the media. They're like, well, kind of knowing Luka Garza was going to play in the game. They're like, well, what would you like?
Comments.
What would you like to see from Luka Garza in this game? And Fitch goes, a pass would be nice. So good.
And all these Iowa people's faces dropped. Like
what?
And what was crazy is when they all left, they were kind of discouraged. Then Fitch said some great things about it. And again, last night, I mean, one of my favorite players I've ever coached. And, he's always ready, which all of this is absolutely true. And he also said in Iowa that they kept him on the team as a two-way guy, even when perhaps his ability didn't augur for it, because of the example he set and what an incredibly great teammate he was, and how he made everybody in the locker room, feel good, and how his effort was a great example for everybody. I mean, it was just the guy. And I remember he was being asked, how do you feel about, you're on these two ways or you're getting these minutes. He said, I'm not ready to get minutes yet. I'm not, it's not my time. I have more work to do in order to do these things. I mean, the guy is just, again, another way, and credit to Tim Connolly, who walks his talk when he talks about this character stuff. I mean, Jaylen Clark is eminently coachable. Luka Garza, super eminently coachable. The guy, led the collegiate, one of the great collegians of all time. I don't follow the sport, but it was, like all-American first team and whatever, and was rudely acquainted with the NBA when he came in. He just, got overwhelmed and just stayed with it. Didn't go overseas for the Bucks. Decided to stay here and just ply his craft and stayed tough. And he's earned the minutes he's getting.
It is interesting that Jaylen Clark and Luka Garza were flawed prospects, majorly flawed prospects on one side of the floor. But Luka Garza literally won Offensive Player of the Year, and Jaylen Clark won Defensive Player of the Year. And Conley invested in those skill sets, understanding that you're going to try to build up some of the other side of the ball, but I mean, these are literally tiny investments that they had to make. I mean, Clark was the 53rd overall pick. I actually feel like Luka might have been the 53rd, not by the Wolves, but like they're both late second round picks, two-way guys. Like what a better chip to put on your two-way square than a guy that is really good at something. You know, that's my thing. I always say is with minimum players, do you have one NBA skill? Like one NBA, like that's what you need. If you're like 6 different things, kinda, I don't know, maybe not. Like, give me one thing and then let's try to build on top of that. Because if you are able to get a couple more things, kind of even, then there you are. You're a rotation player, and I think with both of those guys, we're seeing them develop a couple of things around it, so they look passable to be role players, or at least against second units, or at least in the dog days of the season like this, where you're not gonna get killed.
I think you have. I sooner or later, this story I wrote back in September on Tim Connelly, a feature will be published in Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine. But I really think you have hit upon the Connelly philosophy, which is you project somebody out to be the draft. You don't harp on what they can't do. What you basically do is concentrate on what they can do, and then draft players of really high character who you know are going to try to fill themselves out, and with coaching have a decent chance of filling themselves out. That is one of his philosophies. You know, there are different ways to do it. Some people like swing for the fences on incredibly high-end guys, but they don't think about character, you know. And so, you know, sometimes they wind up with chuckleheads who wind up playing in the Philippines, you know. And so, you know, but Connelly tries to get people who already have an NBA skill and are willing to hone themselves to try to be, you know, as I said, serviceable. If Luka can be serviceable on defense, he can be an NBA rotation player. If Jaylen Clark can be serviceable on offense. Now, I would think, I'll just speak quite frankly, I think the jury is still out on the serviceability of Luka on defense and Jaylen Clark on offense. But they gave this basketball team valuable minutes last night in a win on a back-to-back. And in the NBA, I mean, I don't know what the analytics say, but that's probably worth $1 million.
Yeah, right. Let me grab another break here. We'll keep going about another player that Connelly drafted in Rob Dillingham. But today's show is also brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. And we want to let you know that this next weekend, February 6th and 7th, the KFAN Power Trip is doing a takeover at Treasure Island. We know for a lot of you probably listen to KFAN and are familiar with the Power Trip morning show. They're doing a ton of stuff. It starts with a kickoff party in the Island Event Center on Thursday, February 6th from 7 to 9 p.m. Free live initials game with prize giveaways, including a trip to Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. Then on Friday morning, they're going to do their live broadcast from Treasure Island, which is from 5:30 to 9 a.m. So the idea is go down to Treasure Island, stay for a long weekend for the Super Bowl, and hang out with the KFAN Power Trip group. Chris Hockey's band will be playing Friday night. Tickets are $20. Just go to ticasino.com for more information on this. But I thought for a lot of you who are, you know, obviously Minnesota sports fans, you're intimately familiar with KFAN and the Power Trip crew. I think this sounds like a really fun event. So for more information, tickets, and the full schedule, visit ticasino.com. But last one I don't know, it doesn't be the last topic, but I want to talk about Rob Dillingham. One, I thought to play off of the Luka Garza bit, I thought those two had a good chemistry in both games of Luka popping off of that action. And what actually makes that specific action, you know, forceful and impactful is sort of the shift in Dillingham's game that we're seeing in him trying to get downhill more often.
It opens the lane, right?
Yeah, because if he can just take those 2 steps in there, or even more, and get all the way to the basket for some finishes, which Dillingham's finishing has been encouraging of late. But the real thing is can you put your head down, get in enough to suck in the big, and then kick it to Garza, you know, for an open 3-point look. Like you said before, we've watched it a ton. Luka Garza's a shooter, you know. There's a similarity to Naz's game in that too. It's a quick trigger. He'll make quick decisions. Luka's decision will often be to shoot, but like it will be decisive. And I thought those two played well off of each other, but really it's just a representation of the shift we're seeing in Dillingham's game, of him being an effectively aggressive offensive player, less so concerned about being a table setter, and also playing in groups where he doesn't need to be a table setter.
Right.
I like him when he's spotted up in the corner or above the break, playing as functionally the two in that possession where Ant's initiating. He shared the floor with Conley in the Phoenix game.
Right, yeah.
Nikhil initiates a lot, next to him. Sometimes I'm like, why isn't Rob up at the top here? But that's kind of part of this free flowing offense that they have, is like anybody can bring it. Julius can bring it, whatever it might be.
Right.
And I think Dillingham fits well around that and is finding aggressive positions on the second side or around Ant or around the initial thing to be opportunistic about his offense. I think, he's not part of the backfilling for the Randle injury, but he is the backfilling for the Dante DiVincenzo injury, and have been very encouraged.
And now the Mike Conley absence. So,
sure.
I mean, it is interesting. He also he's ahead of Luka and some of these other players defensively. But he's not, he's probably $165 or something in terms of his weight. And that traditionally has been something, I remember Tyus Jones' first 2 or 3 years here, and
sure,
game, smart, good defender, better overall defensive instincts than Dillingham, and still got steamrolled on a fairly regular basis. It just is what happens in the NBA sometimes. But what I see from Dillingham is a willingness to defend and a desire to be in the mix when he does that, which every now and then, he's got the mentality of a shooter, and he's got a lot of confidence that, said the other day, in response, I'm not going to lie, the game is simple. That those comments will come back to bite him very quickly, I think. But it kind of obscures the fact of how willing he is to try to be a two-way player. Again, I think that is really important, because it's going to be not that long, maybe as soon as this playoffs, where he's going to be in the rotation and everything is going to be microscopic in terms of matchups. And they are going to want to isolate that guy and overwhelm him. And he needs to, at the very least, provide as good a resistance as he can provide. And, the other stuff is just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. His quickness off the bounce is going to be scouted, and it's going to affect the rest of the offense in a positive way.
Right.
They're going to be able to
go ahead. Yeah. Bring two on that one.
Yeah,
you can't bring two on everybody.
Exactly. And so there's that. And then I think his shot is quick. I think he's got a sense of swagger that can be contagious, especially if he's dishing. I do think if he has an offensive flaw, and I mentioned this last night, he does try some things that worked in college that don't work in the NBA, in terms of, some guys will jump the lane on him, and it's pretty obvious that, they were moving. They read his eyes, a long time. He's had some pick two turnovers that have been, and those has gone down slightly in terms of frequency, but that is, I think, when it's a momentum shift when you throw an outlet pass and the guy goes down the floor and gets a dunk. That's a momentum changer, and so those can be really harmful,
especially playing next to Ant, who sometimes has some of that too. If you
exactly.
have your whole backcourt,
making
youthful mistakes that lead to turnovers, that's gonna
and let's face it, that's offensive rebounding, allowing defensive rebounding, allowing offensive rebounds, and giving the ball points off turnovers are the two things when the Wolves are flailing, and especially having a bad night against bad teams. those are the things that almost always are cropping up. But all that said, 19 points and 8 dimes last night.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Now, Utah is a terrible team on defense. Jordan Clarkson, for God's sake, and, Keontae George. Yeah, I'm sorry,
But that's the thing for Jaylen Clark, Luka Garza, Rob Dillingham, like a lot of what we're even asking them to do is to be effective against second units. Yeah. And Luka Garza was effective against Utah's first unit, which is like a second unit. Right. So it's, I was thinking that too last night, where I'm like, just my notes are just filling up with, this was awesome. This was awesome. This was awesome. Right. And then you go, they are playing in Utah. Specific to these three guys, I'm not giving that too much demerit, because that's the quality of team, right? That of the opponent that they're going to be playing when they're in there playing second unit minutes against, Luka's playing against backup bigs, or, right. Rob's playing against backup point guards, like that sort of thing. That's all they need to, they only need to be able to be this good right now. And that's right. And that's fine.
And it is a great time in the schedule. I mean, Sacramento after Washington. And then I can't remember who's between them and Houston.
It's like all at home, right?
Yeah, 7 of the next 8 games before the break. Their last 8 games before the break, 7 of them are home.
Next 5 all at home: Wizards, Kings, Bulls, Rockets,
that's right.
Blazers.
Yeah,
and then that's the deadline.
Yeah.
I want to say about the defense with Dillingham, and honestly, it's been a hard topic, I think, to talk about, or I think for you to write about too at times, with this sort of Dillingham minutes conundrum that's happened. And he was given a cap on what he was going to play, if he was going to play, and there was understandable frustration off that. And I'm not saying they handled that perfectly, but what I think happened as a product of giving Rob little leash was he had to play defense, he had to put in the effort defensively to be able to play minutes.
Right.
And, a carrot stick sort of thing there. And I've thought a lot about Dillingham's rookie year in comparison to Ant's, and Ant did not have to play defense didn't play defense his rookie year to get the opportunity to play and show you all the things that were attractive about him. And I think this is really important with Dillingham, to set early in his career standards and understanding and expectations of of how he needs to play defensively. So Rob isn't in year 5 and having some of the lapses defensively that Ant still has at his 5th year in the league. And I don't know, he's already going to have the physical limitations, right? Substantially more physical limitations than Ant will, or Ant does. So mentally, let's be sharp about it. Let's know what you need to do to be able to survive and make it on that side of the floor, particularly on a team that's a defensive first identity. Right. I think, as frustrated as he's been, as frustrated as the fan base has certainly been, that he's been shelved, I think there's going to be some positive externalities that come from that carrot versus stick sort of thing defensively with him.
Another thing that I did notice is that he began to have a pretty good relationship with Gobert in the time that they were out there. He looks for him, and Rudy tries to be like the ultimate professional and does a lot of things right about that. I'll never question his sense of accountability. But I also know that if somebody tries to find Rudy on offense, he will be better. He'll be more tolerant and probably a better assistant to him on defense.
Sure.
At the other end of the court. The people who I'm not saying it's a direct quid pro quo. I think it's just the way players naturally act. Hey, this guy, it's almost like somebody gets a steal. You want to allow them to get the basket at the other end or something, just kind of like a justice thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that Rob has hit Rudy on some nice passes, some good lobs, some other stuff. And you notice sometimes, I notice when Rob loses a man, Rudy is there, man. I mean, Rudy... And that's also Rudy saying, how do I make this defense show up? Well, I got a weak link here that I'm going to have to seal on occasion. But I like the relationship those guys have. That and by the way, it took a long time, I think, for Ant and Rudy to warm up to each other in this way. Of Ant going, oh yeah, I'm feeding Rudy, and Rudy going, yeah, Ant feeds me, so I can, that quid pro quo, or whatever you want to call it, that mutuality was slower in coming between those two guys. It's there now, I think, but I like the way, and given the fact that Rudy's here for a while, and is going to be extremely important as the last refuge on Dillingham defensive mistakes, that's going to be an important relationship.
What this has me thinking about is Utah. His defensive role in Utah was to cover up weak links. Donovan, that was not right. Donovan. I mean, there was a lot of guys that were
everybody but Royce O'Neal.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, Bogdanovich was okay, but like there was a lot of holes, and that was really Rudy's job. And I would say like the best. I think Rudy's really good at that. And a Wolves example of it is when he's in that spiral and Cat is guarding Jokic or whoever the other center is. Rudy has tremendous feel for that cat and mouse game of taking care of his while also being able to help the weak link. And it's why when you see Rudy's mad, he does that thing where he spreads his hands and is like, I got it. You stay out there, because that's the thing that bothers him most, is when somebody tries to come in to help him on his guy that he's leaving, and then that gets kicked out for an open three. He's like, no, you just stay out there on that guy. I just think that is, and the Wolves were different than Utah in their strategy around Gobert was always 4 good defenders next to Rudy. Last season, they always played good defenders. But, as this, roster has necessarily had to get better offensively, I would imagine that's a conversation that Tim Conley in the front office and Finch had of like, well, let's integrate some offensive focus pieces and let's protect them. Yeah.
And also let's remind ourselves, we just got through, is Ant a good defender? Yeah, a lot of the times, but a lot of the times, no, he is not.
Mm-hmm.
Is Cat a good defender? Well, he learned to be a very good defender, at least average, if not maybe even slightly above average, with Rudy next to him.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I remember Derek Favors, who was tall and looked athletic and was a terrible defender. And he played next to Rudy, and Rudy covered for him all the time because Derek Favors could score.
Right.
But you're right about the fact that Utah just threw him to the wolves, pardon the pun, and essentially said, you are responsible for cleaning up everybody else's mistakes, Joe Ingles or whatever. But the Wolves did change that and want to beef up, Finch's whole ball pressure idea. And then the way they had to sell the Rudy expansion that unlocked everything last year was, all right, you're going to roam, but you can trust that when you roam, your home is safe. You somebody will backfill and do it right, and so on and so forth. And when Randle wasn't doing that at the beginning of the year, and you still see it every now and then, Rudy's indecision. When Rudy's having a bad defensive game, it might be because he's become increasingly susceptible to that little floater that a big can do, the Senguns and whatever.
Sure.
But when he's having an overall bad game, it may also be that he has lost trust, and either over a period of games or during that particular game, in his teammates' ability to cover something, and he is
great point.
Trying not to be petulant about it, but trying to do 2 jobs at once, and inevitably being frustrated when that doesn't work. And so it is on his teammates a lot of times when Rudy gets, it's like the defensive back who tries to cover for the guy who fell down and is there for the touchdown catch, Rudy has that happen a lot. And so again, which is all to say that if you have a player who can't play defense well, but is willing to try and also is willing to engage Rudy on offense, it's the best combination for a bad defender who Rudy has to work with.
Well, and it goes both ways, right? Because it's on the offensive side of the floor too. So what for Ant and Rob, I think it would be very valuable for them to understand the degree to which Rudy is taking care of their defensive mistakes.
Right.
So that when they pass it to Rudy and Rudy makes an offensive mistake, it just drops it or doesn't hit the shot or pumps. You know, and a lot of that is the biggest thing I think with Rudy is picking his spots offensively.
Right.
But sometimes it's about putting him in the right spots and consistently doing it. You know, Ant has said, he's like, well, in so many words of, well, when Rudy isn't catching it, then I'm not going to go back to it. You know, but if he does, then he's going to go back to it again and again. And I just think the Rudy stuff, because it's so loud, you know, when he makes a mistake offensively, that I think in Rob and Ant and everybody's head watching, it's like, oh my God, a Rudy mistake. It's not as loud when Rob makes a mistake defensively, just it's because it's a mistake because he's small. Or Ant doesn't rotate over. But it's the same thing to me, man. It really is.
It's still 2 points that you don't have.
Exactly.
It's, you know, it's 2 points that a guy was able to get on that defender, or it's 2 points that you don't get because the offense made a mistake. Mm-hmm. One of the things I do want to point out, I think it was last night. It might have been Phoenix, but I'm pretty sure it was last night. Ant threw a pass to Rudy. I'm sure Ant was credited with the turnover. It was a little fast and not directly at his chest. It was a little bit to his left, but a typical basketball player would have caught that ball and slammed it home. It was very early in the game. Very next possession, Ant came down, drove, and did a shovel pass to a cutting Rudy for a slam. And Jim Pete immediately jumped on it and said something about it. But I was right there with him. I mean, if I was on the mic, I would have said the same thing. Right after, Ant will get credited with a turnover when it was clearly Rudy's turnover. Ant comes down and feeds him, and this is right after he, you know, he's been called out by Finch and everything. And all of a sudden, you know, here we go. And so, you know, that's just fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of early, I just have it played up here on YouTube, a lot of Rudy early in the game, and they're putting 2 on the ball there. And, you know, Rudy needs to be that short role player that we, you know, we talk about all the time. And the first 2 possessions that they did that, you know, didn't work. And then they kept going back to it throughout the first quarter, because what are you supposed to do if they're putting all the attention onto Ant? The 7'2" guy needs to stand underneath the basket or in the lane, catch the ball, and score it.
What made that also a little bit of a risk was there was no Conley.
Yeah, true.
You know, and so, you know, you were relying on Ant and Nah to do this when, you know, Conley's just like naturally he's going to do that stuff.
Yes. And maybe I actually didn't think about it. That's a good point. I was like, because they literally the first play of the game is a designed Ant back screen for Rudy to roll up into the post there. Like, I think they probably called the first play of the game for Rudy because they're like, well, if Mike's not starting, he might not touch the ball.
That's like the first play of the game called by Utah was a Walker Kessler 3.
Yeah,
so I mean, it's like there's all kinds of deep chess going on there.
Right. So I guess that Dillingham kind of turned into a Rudy thing a little bit, but those do. It's important that Rob is friend. Yeah. Yes.
Free flowing. Chris Finch's free flowing podcast.
No, I think that was good. And now we're up about well over an hour. Am I miss anything just from the last couple?
I just want to say a couple of things. Just because January was such a cool month. I mean, it's like, what were they, 10-6? So it wasn't like it wasn't like a 23-24 season month, but it was Gobert was tied for 5th in blocks in the NBA in the month of January with 27. Jaden McDaniels tied for 6th in steals with 26 and tied for 24th in blocks with 16. Jaden is usually known as a great on-ball defender who doesn't necessarily get a ton of steals and blocks. He's just a shutdown guy. The fact that he's kind of expanded that portfolio, not only in terms of his shooting and his activity, but also his block and steal ratio was something I thought was interesting. And by the way, I mean, I have to mention these two stats in tandem. Ant was 18th in the NBA in assists in the month of January. He was second in turnovers to Cade Cunningham. So, you do have to give that. But the idea, the guy, continued to bomb effectively from three, as I just mentioned, got to the line, aside from SGA, shot 25 more free throws than anybody else in the NBA, and was 18th in top 20 in assists. He had a hell of a month, and as a result, our prognosis for this team, I wrote a column, Harsh Truths, 2 or 3 weeks ago, saying, they're not going to duplicate last season, and that's going to be true. I mean, and they're not going to probably go to the Western Conference Finals, but the odds of them finishing with home court advantage, the odds of them at least avoiding the play-in, the odds of them also developing talent as they go along, so it's not a wasted season, the odds of this team not feeling dysfunctional as they go gently into this good night and lose in the first round or whatever, all of those things are rearranged as a result of, I think, what's happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks. As you mentioned, the defense creating offense and the offense also finding a flow and being able to filter in people. The lineup change with Conley and DDV, I think, really helped. DDV's injury did not hurt as a result. And then having the bench unit be ready to go. Yeah, sure, against the inferior opponents sometimes, but that's precisely why you win games with your bench. And the last time they played the Wizards, it took, a great fourth quarter for them to beat that terrible team. It'll be interesting to see whether the bench can make that an easier journey as they did the other night in Utah when the Wizards come to town on Saturday. And then, you've got a Sacramento team that who knows where their heads are right now. Right. Talking about De'Aaron Fox after Doug Christie was the savior for a while. And so, that team, we don't know about, they're in disarray. And then you got the Bulls, again, a team kind of flailing. There's a real chance here for an 8-game winning streak by the time you have Houston. And so, that's that you stack wins like that and the future possibilities begin to become a lot rosier. And, we're in the middle of that. Why not celebrate it?
You might say they're raging against the dying of the light.
That's right.
He's Britt Robson. You can follow him on Twitter and Blue Sky at Britt Robson. He did write a column over at MinPost before the Phoenix game, kind of reacting to the Atlanta game. Is kind of, I read it after the fact, kind of like reading that helped me appreciate what these two games were and kind of the place the Wolves are in. I think that was a good way to close it with what this January has been. And now it is not only, I think, about sustaining, but continuing to elevate to the deadline, through the deadline, and see where this team can go. Because this is a team that is committed to this season. I think they were, a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even the beginning of January, there was how this January plays out might determine what they do at the deadline, even maybe becoming sellers.
Right. It was a tough schedule. January was a tough schedule.
And they played through it, and they've put themselves in a situation and to be able to compete and to continue going. And I think that's what was the urgency behind Finch's energy. Really was like, this is the opportunity at the end of this month to get some things right, or they might break this thing up, and we're not playing meaningful basketball in the spring, which is Finch's, as he stated many times, the important thing with Ant is to put him in the playoffs over and over and over again in opportunities for him to get experience and learn and win. And I don't think it's just about experience. It is about Finch believing that, you do have Anthony Edwards, and there is a different level that he goes to in the playoffs, and he looks like what he did in the last 48 hours, angry and focused and dedicated, and they want Ant to be there every single year. And I think this, we might reflect on the end of January, if they do get there, as a place that turned them into a direction that got them to be able to play those meaningful games. Now there's still February, March, and half of April to go. Plenty of time for this team to click back into old habits, but that's going to be the test. And I'm really interested to see what that looks like. We'll be writing about it. I'll be potting about it. Next up is Washington, and Jason and I will discuss on Monday morning what that game looked like. We'll continue to kind of talk about the team through the deadline next week as well, and see what does come to fruition, not just with the Wolves, but around the league. It's been a fun time to cover the Wolves. Britt, I appreciate you coming on, and for all you listeners, until Monday with Jace, he's Britt, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.